Two cashiers laughed, slapped a black man in front of a packed cafe, and had no idea they had just humiliated the man who owned every chair, every table, and every dollar inside the building. When two cashiers publicly humiliated a black man wearing a worn-out jacket, they thought they were mocking just another customer. They laughed at him, judged him, and treated him like he didn't belong. What they didn't realize was that Marcus Reed wasn't a stranger at all. He was the founder of the very coffee company they worked for. But this story is about far more than a hidden owner. It's about a promise made long ago, a talented employee whose work was stolen, and a homeless man carrying a secret that could change everything. As the truth comes to light, careers will collapse, lives will be transformed, and one question will remain. What happens when kindness meets the people who never expected it? Rain fell steadily over downtown Seattle, turning the sidewalks into rivers of reflected neon light. Cars hissed through puddles. Bus brakes groaned at crowded corners. People hurried beneath umbrellas, shoulders hunched against the cold. Marcus Reed walked alone through the rain. At first glance, nobody would have looked twice at him. His dark jacket was old. The cuffs were worn smooth from years of use. His baseball cap had faded beneath countless cloudy mornings. The leather of his shoes had cracked around the edges. To most people passing by, he looked like another tired man trying to stay warm. Marcus preferred it that way. He pulled his collar higher against the wind and stopped across the street from a familiar building. The cafe glowed warmly through large front windows. Inside, people laughed over coffee cups. Yellow light spilled onto the wet sidewalk. The smell of roasted beans drifted through the air every time the door opened. For a long moment, Marcus simply stood there. His eyes lingered on the sign above the entrance. The rain tapped softly against the brim of his cap. Then he crossed the street. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped inside. Warm air wrapped around him instantly. The place was busy. Students sat behind laptops. Young professionals filled the corner tables. A couple shared a pastry near the window. Nobody looked at Marcus for more than a second. He quietly joined the line. Behind the counter stood two young cashiers, Tiffany and Chloe. Both wore matching green aprons. Both looked bored. Both were scrolling on their phones between customers. Marcus waited patiently. The woman ahead of him ordered a caramel latte. The man behind him ordered 3 drinks for coworkers. Everyone received smiles. Everyone received cheerful greetings. Then Marcus stepped forward. Tiffany glanced up. Her eyes traveled slowly from his shoes to his jacket. Something changed in her expression. Not fear, not curiosity. Judgment. "What do you want?" she asked. The warmth in her voice had vanished. Marcus smiled politely. "A cortado, please." For a second, Tiffany stared at him. Then Chloe laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. "A cortado?" Chloe repeated. Tiffany shook her head. "You sure that's what you mean?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Chloe smirked. "You know what a cortado is?" Several customers nearby glanced over. Marcus remained calm. "I do." Tiffany tapped the register dramatically. "Interesting." The word hung in the air. Marcus could feel eyes on him now. The atmosphere had changed. People sensed something uncomfortable unfolding, but nobody spoke. "Anything else?" Tiffany asked. "A slice of banana bread." She entered the order. Marcus reached into his pocket. A few bills, some coins. The change slipped from his fingers. Several quarters rolled across the counter. One fell onto the floor. Marcus immediately bent down to pick them up. Before he could finish, Chloe sighed loudly. "Oh my God." Tiffany exchanged a look with her, the kind of look that said everything without words. Marcus picked up another coin. As he reached for the last one, Tiffany abruptly slapped her hand down onto the counter beside it. The sharp sound echoed louder than it should have. Several heads turned. Marcus froze. Not because it hurt, because of what followed. "You don't need to count every penny," Tiffany said. Her voice carried across the room. A few uncomfortable chuckles came from somewhere behind him. Marcus slowly stood. His face remained calm. Very calm. The kind of calm people develop after surviving harder things than embarrassment. "I wasn't counting," he said gently. "I was just picking it up." Chloe laughed. "Sure." The drinks arrived moments later. Tiffany placed the cup on a tray. Marcus reached for it. As he did, Tiffany let go carelessly. The tray tilted, the coffee spilled, the cup crashed onto the floor. Brown liquid spread across the polished tile. Gasps rippled through the cafe. Marcus stepped back. His pants were splashed with coffee. The room fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For a brief moment, all Marcus could hear was the rain striking the windows. Tiffany crossed her arms. "Maybe be more careful." Marcus looked down at the mess. Then he looked around the room. Dozens of people. Dozens of witnesses. Not one person asked if he was okay. Not one person questioned what had happened. Most simply looked away. The same way people always looked away. Marcus felt an old ache stir somewhere deep inside him. An ache older than the cafe. Older than the city. Older than the rain outside. An ache that began when he was a little boy standing beside his mother. The ache of being judged before speaking. Of being measured before being known. Of being dismissed before being understood. Slowly, Marcus crouched down. He picked up the fallen cup. Then he grabbed several napkins from a nearby station and began cleaning the floor himself. Nobody helped. The silence became heavier. Even Tiffany seemed slightly uncomfortable now. Marcus finished wiping the spill. He placed the wet napkins into the trash. Then he turned back toward the counter. For the first time, Tiffany looked directly into his eyes. Marcus smiled. Not angrily, not bitterly, just sadly. Then he spoke. "Thank you." Tiffany frowned. "For what?" Marcus looked around the cafe. At the customers. At the employees. At the glowing sign on the wall. At the company slogan framed near the register. "Everyone deserves a seat." His eyes rested there for a moment. Then he looked back at Tiffany. "Thank you for showing me what I needed to see." The smile disappeared from her face. "What does that mean?" Marcus adjusted his jacket. The rain outside had intensified. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the city. "It means," he said quietly, "sometimes the truth only appears when nobody knows who's watching." For a second, uncertainty flickered across her face. Then it vanished. She rolled her eyes. Marcus nodded politely. Without another word, he walked toward the door. The bell chimed again as he stepped back into the rain. Cold wind swept across the sidewalk. Cars splashed through puddles. Seattle carried on exactly as before. But Marcus did not move immediately. He stood beneath the awning and looked through the window. Inside, Tiffany was already laughing with Chloe again. The moment had been forgotten, at least by them. Marcus slipped a hand into his jacket pocket. His fingers closed around a small set of keys. One key was different from the others. Silver, engraved, old. The key to the very first cafe location ever opened by the company. The location standing directly in front of him. Marcus stared through the glass. His reflection stared back. A tired-looking man in an old jacket. A man nobody respected. A man nobody noticed. A man everyone underestimated. Slowly, he pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over a contact name. Then he pressed call. The line connected after 2 rings. "Mr. Reed?" a voice answered. Marcus continued staring at the cafe. His expression hardened for the first time all day. "Clear my schedule for the next week." There was a pause. "Everything?" "Everything." Another pause. "Is something wrong?" Marcus watched Tiffany wave goodbye to a well-dressed customer. A bright smile. Perfect service. Perfect manners. A completely different person. "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "Something is very wrong." The rain continued falling, and for the first time in years, Marcus Reed decided he was going back inside his own company. Not as the owner, not as the founder, not as the man whose name appeared on corporate documents. This time he was going back as someone nobody would notice, someone invisible, and what he was about to discover would change every life connected to that cafe, including his own. The rain followed Marcus all the way home. Seattle looked different at night. The office towers became shadows against the clouds. Streetlights painted long golden streaks across wet pavement. The city seemed quieter after dark, as if it were holding secrets beneath the sound of distant traffic. Marcus parked his car in the underground garage of a modest apartment building in Capitol Hill. Most people expected a man like him to live in a mansion overlooking Lake Washington. He never had. Luxury had never interested him. Peace had. He rode the elevator to the 6th floor, unlocked his apartment door, and stepped inside. The space was simple. 2 bedrooms, a bookshelf filled with biographies and old business journals, family photographs, a worn leather chair beside a window overlooking the city. No marble floors, no gold fixtures, no signs that the man living there owned one of the fastest-growing coffee companies in the Pacific Northwest. Marcus hung his wet jacket near the door. For a moment, he simply stood there. Quiet. The events of the afternoon replayed in his mind. The laughter, the judgment, the coffee spilling across the floor, the silence from everyone watching. Strangely, none of it surprised him, because none of it was new. It never had been. He walked toward a small wooden cabinet in the corner of the living room. The cabinet held very few things, important things. The kind people save not because they're valuable, but because they hurt too much to throw away. Marcus opened the drawer. Inside sat an old photograph. Its edges were faded. The colors had begun to disappear. But he knew every detail without looking. He picked it up. A young black woman smiled back at him. His mother. Evelyn Reed. The strongest person he had ever known. Marcus lowered himself into the leather chair and stared at the photograph. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. And just like that, he was 12 years old again. Back in South Seattle. Back before the company. Back before success. Back before anyone knew his name. The apartment where he grew up sat inside a housing project surrounded by cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences. Most people only drove through the neighborhood when they had no other choice. Politicians appeared every election season, then disappeared again. The buildings were old. The elevators rarely worked. The heating system broke every winter. But to Marcus, it was home. His mother worked nights cleaning office buildings downtown. Every evening, she left wearing the same blue uniform. Every morning, she returned exhausted. Yet somehow, she always smiled. Marcus never understood how. One Saturday morning when he was 12, she surprised him. "Get dressed," she said. He looked up from the kitchen table. "Why?" "Because we're going downtown." His eyes widened. Downtown Seattle felt like another world. Different people, different buildings, different lives. They took 2 buses across the city. Marcus remembered watching expensive cars glide past while his mother squeezed his hand. He remembered the smell of fresh bread drifting from bakeries, the crowds, the music, the energy. For a little while he forgot where they came from. Then they stopped in front of a cafe. Small, bright, beautiful. Marcus had never seen anything like it. His mother smiled. "You ever had real hot chocolate?" He shook his head. She laughed. "Then today's your lucky day." Inside, sunlight poured through giant windows. People sat reading newspapers. Businessmen drank coffee while discussing deals. Everything felt warm, safe, important. Marcus still remembered how excited he felt. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged somewhere outside his neighborhood. His mother walked to the counter. She checked the menu, then checked the money in her purse. Her smile faded slightly. Only slightly, Marcus noticed, even at 12. A woman behind the register looked at them, then looked at their clothes, then looked away. Marcus didn't understand the expression then. He did now. His mother ordered 1 hot chocolate, not 2. 1. The cashier glanced at Marcus, then at Evelyn. "Just 1? His mother nodded. "We'll share." The woman sighed dramatically. The people standing behind them shifted impatiently. Marcus felt heat creep into his cheeks. His mother paid. The cashier counted the money twice, then counted it a 3rd time, as if expecting it to be wrong, as if expecting them to be wrong. Finally, the woman handed over the drink. But before they could find a table, another employee approached. "We need those seats for paying customers." Marcus frowned. "We paid." The words escaped before he could stop them. The employee looked directly at him, then at his mother, then back at him. "Take it outside." The smile vanished from Evelyn's face. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something worse. Resignation. Like this wasn't the first time. Like she had seen this movie before. Marcus still remembered the silence that followed. The walk back toward the door, the hot chocolate growing colder in his hands. The sound of laughter behind them. Outside, they sat on a bus stop bench. Rain had started falling, just like tonight. His mother broke the silence first. "You okay?" Marcus stared at the cup. "No." She nodded. Neither was she. For a while they sat without speaking. Cars rushed past. People hurried by. Nobody noticed them. Finally, Marcus asked a question, one he had carried for years. "Why don't they like us?" Evelyn turned toward him. Her eyes softened. "Oh, baby." The pain in her voice frightened him. She reached over and brushed rainwater from his forehead. "Some people decide who you are before they ever meet you." Marcus looked down. "That's not fair, no." She smiled sadly. "It isn't." The city lights reflected in the puddles around their feet. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Evelyn pointed across the street. A small empty storefront sat between 2 buildings. Its windows were dusty. Its sign was gone. Most people would have ignored it. She didn't. "You see that place?" Marcus nodded. "One day, maybe somebody will open something beautiful there." He followed her gaze. Maybe they'll make everybody feel welcome." The idea sounded impossible. Everybody? Everybody. She squeezed his hand. "No matter how much money they have." Marcus listened. "No matter what color they are." He nodded. "No matter where they come from." The rain continued falling. and somewhere inside a 12-year-old boy, a promise quietly took root. One day he would build a place where nobody would be told to leave. One day he would build a place where nobody would be forced to drink hot chocolate in the rain. One day he would build a place where everybody deserved a seat. The memory faded slowly. Marcus found himself staring once more at the photograph in his apartment. His eyes lingered on his mother's smile. She had been gone almost 15 years, yet some nights it still felt impossible. He carefully returned the photograph to the drawer. Then he stood and walked toward the window. The city glowed beneath the rain. The cafe from earlier remained only a few miles away. A place built on a promise. A place now betraying that promise. Marcus folded his arms. Something had been bothering him since the afternoon. Not the slap. Not the insults. Something else. A feeling. A memory he couldn't quite reach. He thought about the layout, the windows, the corner tables, the old brick walls. Then suddenly he froze. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. No, it couldn't be. He walked quickly toward his office desk, opened a file cabinet, pulled out a thick folder containing the earliest company records, photographs, lease agreements, construction permits. His hands moved faster now, page after page, year after year. Then he found it, a photograph, old, yellowed with age. Marcus stared at it, the empty storefront his mother pointed at all those years ago. The same storefront he eventually purchased, the same storefront he transformed into his very first cafe. The same storefront where Tiffany had laughed at him only hours earlier. Marcus slowly sat down. A strange mixture of sadness and disbelief washed over him. The cafe. That cafe. The place where his mother had inspired the dream. The place where she taught him dignity. The place where everything began. And now it had become the place where people were being humiliated all over again. Outside, thunder rolled across Seattle. Marcus looked at the photograph, then toward the rain-dark window, then back at the photograph. His jaw tightened. The promise he made at 12 years old suddenly felt very close and very broken. He picked up his phone, opened the company directory, scrolled to the flagship location, then stared at the names of the employees working there, one by one, carefully, patiently. Because tomorrow, he wasn't going back as Marcus Reed. Tomorrow, he was going back as someone nobody would notice, someone invisible, someone ordinary. And for the first time in years, the founder of Iron Seat Coffee was about to find out what really happened inside his own house. The question was no longer whether something was wrong. The question was how deep the rot actually went. Marcus barely slept. The rain continued through most of the night, tapping against the windows of his apartment like impatient fingers. Around 3 a.m, he gave up trying to rest. He sat in the leather chair by the window and watched Seattle glow beneath the clouds. Thousands of lights, thousands of lives, thousands of stories unfolding behind glass and concrete, some hopeful, some painful, most invisible. His mother used to say that every person carried a story nobody else could see. The problem, she often reminded him, was that too many people stopped looking. Marcus thought about that as dawn slowly approached. By 6 o'clock, the rain had weakened to a steady mist. The city was waking up. Buses rolled through the streets. Delivery trucks backed into loading docks. Coffee shops opened their doors, including the one he couldn't stop thinking about. He grabbed his jacket and headed outside. Not toward the office, not toward a meeting, just toward the city. Sometimes walking helped him think. The air smelled like wet asphalt and pine trees. Seattle always smelled cleaner after rain. Marcus walked several blocks without a destination. His thoughts drifted between the cafe, his mother, and the promise he'd made as a boy. A promise that suddenly felt more important than quarterly earnings or expansion plans. As he crossed an intersection near an aging bus terminal, movement caught his attention. People were gathering, not helping, just gathering. The way people do when something uncomfortable happens to someone else. Marcus slowed. A city bus had just pulled away from the curb. Near the shelter, an elderly man sat slumped awkwardly on a bench. At first glance, he appeared to be sleeping. Then Marcus noticed something else. Nobody was speaking to him. Nobody was checking on him. People were simply walking around him, avoiding him, pretending not to notice. The old man wore layers of worn clothing, a frayed coat, faded work boots, fingerless gloves. His gray beard was damp from the weather. A backpack rested beside him. Everything about him suggested homelessness. Marcus felt a familiar ache, the same ache he'd felt inside the cafe. Judgment, assumption, dismissal. He stepped closer. The old man's breathing looked shallow, his head tilted unnaturally against the bench. Marcus immediately knelt beside him. "Sir?" No response. "Sir, can you hear me?" The old man's eyelids fluttered slightly, then closed again. Marcus glanced around. Several people watched. Nobody moved. One woman shrugged and continued walking. A man in a business suit checked his phone and crossed the street. The bus station remained busy. Life moved forward. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. As he spoke with the operator, he carefully removed his jacket and draped it over the old man's shoulders. The temperature had dropped. The wind coming off the water felt colder than usual. The operator asked questions. Marcus answered calmly. Location, condition, breathing, awareness. When the call ended, he stayed exactly where he was. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The old man slowly opened his eyes. Cloudy blue eyes, confused, tired, but kind. The first thing he noticed was Marcus. "You didn't have to stay." His voice sounded rough, like sandpaper. Marcus smiled. "Sure I did." The old man studied him. Most people looked away from him quickly. Marcus didn't. That seemed to surprise him. "You'll miss work." Marcus laughed softly. "I own my schedule." The old man chuckled weakly. "Must be nice." The ambulance arrived moments later. Paramedics quickly examined him. Low blood sugar, dehydration, exhaustion. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but enough to require treatment. As they prepared to transport him, one of the paramedics turned to Marcus. "Family?"
Sir,
Marcus shook his head.
what happened?
"No."
Is he allergic to
"Friend?"
anything?
"No." The paramedic hesitated.
I'll explain everything then.
"You know him?" Marcus looked at the old man. The old man looked back. Neither knew the other's name. "No," Marcus admitted. The paramedic nodded. Then he smiled. "Funny." "What is?" "You stayed longer than most family members do." Marcus watched as they loaded the man into the ambulance. For a second, he considered leaving. He had meetings, calls, responsibilities. Instead, he climbed into his car and followed the ambulance. An hour later, he sat inside a crowded emergency room. The television mounted in the corner played a morning news show nobody was watching. Coffee machines hummed. Nurses moved quickly through hallways. Outside, rain streaked down the windows. Marcus waited. And waited. And waited. The old man finally emerged from an examination room shortly before noon. A nurse pushed him in a wheelchair. His color looked better. His eyes looked clearer. The nurse smiled at Marcus. He keeps asking if the man from the bus stop left. Marcus stood. I'm still here. The old man stared. A strange expression crossed his face. Part gratitude, part confusion, part disbelief. Why? Marcus blinked. Why what? Why stay? The question sounded genuine, as if the answer truly mattered. Marcus pulled up a chair. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then he remembered his mother. Remembered that rainy bus stop bench years ago. Remembered how invisible she'd felt. Because someone should. The old man's eyes glistened. Neither man spoke for several seconds. The emergency room noise faded into the background. The old man finally extended a trembling hand. Arthur. Marcus shook it. Marcus. Arthur nodded slowly. Good to meet you, Marcus. You too. Arthur looked down at the jacket still covering his lap. You gave me this. You needed it more. Arthur laughed quietly. Most people don't agree with that. Marcus smiled. Most people aren't my mother. Arthur seemed to like that answer. The nurse returned with paperwork. Discharge forms. Instructions. Medication information. Arthur's smile faded. Marcus noticed immediately. What is it? Arthur hesitated, then shrugged. Nothing. The answer sounded familiar. People usually said nothing when the real answer hurt. Marcus waited. Eventually, Arthur sighed. I don't have a place to go. The words hung in the air. Simple, heavy, honest. Marcus nodded slowly. Arthur stared out the window. I used to. His voice softened. Not anymore. Marcus didn't ask questions. Everyone carried a story. Not everyone was ready to tell it. Instead, he stood. Come on. Arthur frowned. Where? Lunch. Arthur looked shocked. Marcus laughed. What? The old man shook his head. You already spent half your day helping me. Marcus smiled. My afternoon's still available. Arthur stared at him for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. The old man laughed. Not politely, not cautiously. A real laugh. The kind people make when they suddenly remember what hope feels like. An hour later, they sat inside a small diner near the waterfront. Nothing fancy. Red booths, old photographs on the walls, the smell of soup and fresh bread. Arthur ate slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Marcus pretended not to notice. The waitress pretended not to notice too. That kindness made Marcus like her immediately. Outside, clouds finally began to break apart. A thin strip of sunlight appeared above Elliott Bay. Arthur watched it through the window. You know what's funny? Marcus shook his head. What? Arthur smiled. This morning I thought nobody in Seattle would notice if I disappeared. Marcus listened. Arthur continued staring at the water. Turns out I was wrong. The words landed harder than Marcus expected. He looked down at his coffee. Sometimes people revealed entire lifetimes with a single sentence. Neither man realized how important this meeting would become. Neither knew that their lives had just become connected. Neither knew that somewhere ahead, their paths would collide again. Hours later, Marcus drove Arthur to a shelter across town. Before getting out, Arthur paused. His hand disappeared into his coat pocket. He pulled out an old business card. The edges were worn. The print had faded. He stared at it silently. For a long moment, Marcus thought he might say something. Instead, Arthur slipped the card back into his pocket. Then he looked directly at Marcus. "You don't know who you helped today?" Marcus smiled. "Maybe not." Arthur's eyes softened. "But someday you will." Before Marcus could respond, Arthur stepped out of the car. The shelter doors closed behind him, and for the second time in less than 24 hours, Marcus found himself standing in the rain with more questions than answers. He watched the entrance for a few moments, then returned to his car. The city lights began appearing one by one as evening approached. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow he would stop observing from a distance. Tomorrow he would start looking beneath the surface. Tomorrow he would begin investigating the café. But tonight, one thought remained with him. The old man on the bus stop bench, Arthur, and the strange certainty that their meeting had not been an accident. The thought stayed with Marcus all the way home. Seattle's streets shimmered beneath the evening rain. Headlights stretched across wet pavement like rivers of gold. The city looked beautiful from a distance. Up close, it was different. Up close, people were lonely. Up close, people carried burdens nobody could see. Marcus parked outside his apartment and sat in silence for several moments before turning off the engine. His mind should have been focused on Arthur. Instead, it kept drifting back to the café, the laughter, the judgment, the silence. Most of all, the silence. The customers who watched, the employees who smirked, the way nobody seemed surprised. That was what bothered him most. The behavior hadn't felt unusual. It had felt normal. And if it felt normal, then something inside the company was deeply broken. He entered his apartment and headed straight for his office. The room overlooked downtown Seattle. Rain streaked down the glass, while distant skyscrapers disappeared into low clouds. Marcus turned on a desk lamp. A warm pool of light spread across stacks of reports and financial statements. Most CEOs ended their day reviewing profits. Tonight, Marcus searched for something else. Truth. He logged into the company's customer feedback system. Thousands of comments appeared. Most were ordinary. Great coffee. Friendly service. Nice atmosphere. He almost closed the laptop. Then he narrowed the search. Flagship store. Seattle. Past 12 months. The results changed immediately. His stomach tightened. One review read, "The coffee was fine. The way my elderly father was treated was not." Another, "My husband and I felt unwelcome the moment we walked in." Another, "The cashier acted like we were bothering her by ordering." Marcus kept reading. The rain outside intensified. Hour after hour. Review after review. The same complaints appeared again and again. Not about drinks, not about prices, not about food, about people, about dignity, about respect. A retired school teacher wrote, "I've lived in Seattle for 40 years. I've never felt so uncomfortable ordering a cup of coffee." A construction worker wrote, "The woman behind the counter looked me up and down before deciding I wasn't worth her time." A grandmother wrote, "They smiled at the young professionals behind me. When it was my turn, their faces changed completely." Marcus rubbed his eyes. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The complaints weren't random. They were consistent, systematic. The same names appeared repeatedly. Tiffany, Chloe, Tiffany, Chloe, again, again, again. A cold feeling settled over him. He opened another dashboard. Customer satisfaction rankings. 43 locations. The flagship store ranked dead last. Marcus stared at the screen. Dead last. The very first location. The store built from his mother's dream. The store carrying the company's history. The store that should have represented everything Iron Seat Coffee stood for. Instead, it had become the worst performing location in the entire company. His phone buzzed. A text from his executive assistant. Board meeting agenda attached for Thursday. Marcus ignored it. Another message appeared. Expansion update approved. Ignored. A third. Investors requesting revised projections. Ignored. For the first time in years, none of it mattered. Because profits could hide problems. Growth could hide problems. Success could hide problems. But people rarely lied when they felt humiliated. Marcus continued digging. Around midnight, he found something even stranger. A report showing employee turnover. The flagship location had lost 12 employees in 18 months, nearly double the company average. He opened exit interviews. The answers were vague. Poor management. Favoritism. Lack of opportunity. Hostile environment. No details. Just enough information to raise concern. Not enough to explain why. Marcus leaned back in his chair. His mother's photograph sat nearby. The woman who cleaned office buildings so he could have opportunities she never did. The woman who taught him that success meant nothing if people lost their humanity along the way. He looked at her picture. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The words surprised even him. Sorry for what? For being absent. For assuming values maintained themselves. For spending too much time in boardrooms and not enough time inside stores. For believing the company would always remember why it existed. The clock on the wall ticked quietly. 2 a.m. Marcus closed the customer reviews and opened employee schedules. Names filled the screen. One name appeared everywhere. Tiffany, another, Chloe, peak shifts, weekends, busy hours, everywhere. Then another name caught his attention. Danielle Brooks. Her schedule looked different, very different. Opening shifts, closing shifts, late nights, early mornings, almost no premium hours, almost no high traffic periods. The pattern seemed intentional. Marcus frowned. Why would one employee receive every difficult shift? He pulled up performance reports. Danielle's numbers were excellent. Attendance perfect. Customer comments positive. No disciplinary issues. Yet somehow she remained buried in the least desirable hours. Marcus made a note. Then another. Then another. The list of questions grew longer. By 3 a.m, one thing had become painfully clear. The cafe incident was not an isolated event. It was a symptom. Something larger lived beneath the surface. Something hidden, something protected. Marcus closed the laptop and walked toward the window. Seattle slept beneath clouds and rain. Far below, traffic lights changed for empty intersections. A bus rolled past nearly deserted streets. Somewhere out there, Arthur was probably sleeping in a shelter. Somewhere out there, employees were preparing for tomorrow's shift. Somewhere out there, people were walking into Iron Seat Coffee expecting kindness. Some were receiving it, others weren't. Marcus stared into the darkness. Then he made a decision. No consultants, no reports, no corporate investigations. Not yet. He needed to see the truth himself. The real truth. Not filtered through managers, not softened by executives, not polished for presentations. Tomorrow he would disappear. The founder would vanish. The CEO would vanish. Marcus Reed would vanish. And someone else would walk through the employee entrance. Someone ordinary. Someone forgettable. Someone nobody would notice. He picked up his phone and called a trusted executive despite the late hour. The line answered groggily. "Marcus? I need a favor." A pause. "What kind of favor?" Marcus looked toward the rain-soaked skyline, the kind that stays completely confidential. Now the executive sounded awake. "What are you planning?" Marcus smiled faintly. "The same thing my mother would have done." Silence. Then, "And what's that?" Marcus looked one final time at the customer complaints still glowing on the screen. The words seemed to stare back at him. Unwelcome, ignored, disrespected, embarrassed. He closed the laptop. "I'm going to find out what's really happening." Outside, thunder rolled softly across Seattle, and for the first time in years, the founder of Iron Seat Coffee prepared to become invisible. The next morning, Michael Brooks would walk through the door, and everything would begin to change. Seattle woke beneath a blanket of gray clouds. The rain had finally stopped, but the streets still glistened from the storm. Water dripped from awnings. Delivery trucks rumbled through downtown. The smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee floated through the cold morning air. At exactly 5:20 a.m., a man named Michael Brooks stepped through the employee entrance behind Iron Seat Coffee. At least that was the name on the paperwork. The man himself was Marcus Reed. His beard had been trimmed differently. He wore thick glasses with plain black frames. His expensive watch was gone. His old jacket had been replaced by a faded work coat purchased from a thrift store. Nothing about him suggested ownership. Nothing suggested authority. He looked exactly like someone trying to earn an hourly paycheck, which was exactly the point. The metal back door closed behind him with a hollow clang. The employee hallway smelled faintly of coffee grounds and cleaning supplies. Nobody greeted him. Nobody asked if he needed help. A few workers walked past carrying boxes. None paid attention. Marcus found himself smiling, invisible already. The break room sat near the back of the building. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. An old coffee maker gurgled in the corner. Employee schedules covered a corkboard wall. Marcus stepped closer. The schedule immediately caught his attention. Danielle Brooks. Again. Opening shift. Closing shift. Opening shift. Closing shift. The pattern was impossible to miss. Someone had buried her in the least desirable hours, every single week. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "You must be Michael." Marcus turned. A woman stood in the doorway holding 2 trays of pastries. She appeared to be in her early 30s, dark hair tied back. Flour dusted one sleeve of her uniform. Tired eyes. Kind eyes. The kind of eyes that belonged to people who carried more responsibility than recognition. "That's me," Marcus replied. She shifted the trays and smiled. "I'm Danielle." So this was her, the woman from the reports. The employee nobody seemed to value. Marcus extended a hand. She shook it. "Nice to meet you." "You too." Danielle nodded toward the hallway. "Come on, I'll show you around before the morning rush starts." They walked together through the store. The cafe looked completely different before sunrise. The customer area sat quiet and empty. Chairs remained upside down on tables. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers. The espresso machines hissed and clicked as they warmed up. Outside the windows, downtown Seattle slowly came alive. Danielle moved efficiently, comfortably, like someone who knew every inch of the building. She explained storage areas, supplies, safety procedures, inventory systems. Every answer came quickly. Every detail came from experience. Marcus noticed something else. Every employee they passed asked Danielle questions. Not managers, not supervisors. "Danielle, do we still have blueberry mix? Danielle, where are the extra filters? Danielle, did the shipment arrive?" She answered every question without hesitation. By 6 o'clock, Marcus had already learned something important. The most valuable person in the building wasn't the manager. It was Danielle. Yet nobody seemed willing to acknowledge it. The front doors opened at 6:30. Customers began arriving immediately. Office workers, students, construction crews, retirees. The morning crowd flowed steadily through the cafe. Marcus spent most of the shift stocking supplies and cleaning tables, watching, listening, learning. Then Tiffany arrived. The atmosphere changed instantly, not dramatically, subtly, like a room growing colder. She entered carrying a designer handbag. Chloe followed close behind. Both laughed about something on a phone screen. Neither greeted the staff. Neither greeted Danielle. In fact, Tiffany walked directly past her. Not a hello, not a thank you. Nothing. Danielle simply continued working, as though she expected it, as though it happened every day. Marcus watched carefully. Within minutes, another pattern emerged. A young businessman entered wearing an expensive suit. Tiffany lit up. "Good morning. Great to see you again." Her smile appeared effortless, warm, friendly, professional. A few minutes later, an older black man approached the counter. His coat looked worn. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet. Tiffany's smile vanished. "What can I get you?" The difference was immediate. The same employee, the same counter, the same cafe. A completely different person. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The older man ordered quietly, received his drink, walked away. No greeting, no smile, no warmth. Nothing. The pattern repeated all morning. Certain customers received kindness. Others received indifference. Some received visible annoyance. Marcus started mentally keeping score. By noon, he no longer believed the customer complaints were exaggerations. If anything, they had been understated. Around lunchtime, Danielle disappeared into the kitchen. Marcus followed under the pretense of organizing supplies. Inside, he found her working alone beside industrial ovens. The room smelled incredible. Cinnamon, vanilla, brown sugar, fresh bread. Danielle carefully removed a tray of pastries from an oven. Golden brown, perfectly shaped. Marcus stared. "Those look amazing." Danielle laughed softly. "They should. I've made them about 1,000 times." Marcus picked one up after she offered. The flavor surprised him. Rich, balanced, memorable, far better than anything he expected. "You created these?" She hesitated. Something flickered across her face, then disappeared. Sort of. Sort of. The answer immediately interested him. "What does that mean?" Danielle focused on arranging pastries. "Nothing important." The response sounded rehearsed. The kind people give after learning honesty doesn't help. Marcus let the subject drop. For now. A few hours later, another moment caught his attention. A customer accidentally knocked over a drink near the window. Before anyone else reacted, Danielle hurried over. She cleaned the spill, brought a replacement, checked on the customer, made sure everything was okay. The woman tried to tip her directly. Danielle refused. "It's okay," the customer insisted. Danielle smiled. "Just come back sometime." Marcus watched the exchange from across the room. No cameras, no managers watching, no audience. Just kindness, real kindness, the kind his mother used to admire. Later that afternoon, Marcus stepped into the break room. The room was empty, quiet. A single ceiling fan rotated slowly overhead. He opened the refrigerator looking for bottled water. Something caught his eye. A notebook, small, worn, tucked partially behind a stack of supply forms. Most people would have ignored it. Marcus almost did. Then he noticed handwriting on the cover. Danielle Brooks. His curiosity stirred. Before he could examine it further, voices echoed down the hallway. Tiffany and Chloe. Approaching. Marcus quickly stepped away from the table. The two women entered laughing. Neither noticed him. Neither noticed the notebook. But Marcus noticed something else. As Tiffany opened a drawer beneath the counter, she slipped a small object inside. Something she clearly didn't want visible. A thin black journal. Different from Danielle's notebook. Much thinner. Much more secretive. Tiffany closed the drawer immediately, then turned and left with Chloe. Marcus remained still, waiting, listening. The hallway grew quiet again. Slowly, he approached the register area. The drawer remained slightly open. Just enough. Inside sat the black journal, hidden, protected, important. Marcus stared at it. Instinct immediately told him the book mattered. The same instinct that helped him build a company from nothing. The same instinct that told him Arthur wasn't just another homeless man. The same instinct that told him the rot inside this cafe ran deeper than rude employees. Much deeper. Very carefully, Marcus reached toward the drawer, because for the first time since entering the store, he believed he was about to find proof. And whatever was written inside that journal might explain everything. Marcus waited. The cafe remained busy. The afternoon crowd moved through the store in waves. Customers entered. Customers left. The espresso machine hissed. Milk steamed. Coffee grinders roared. Normal sounds. Normal business. Normal life. But beneath it all, Marcus could feel something darker moving underneath the surface. He glanced toward the front counter. Tiffany stood laughing with Chloe. Neither paid attention to him. Neither seemed concerned. People who hide secrets often become careless, especially when nobody has challenged them before. Marcus slowly opened the drawer. The black journal rested beneath a stack of receipts. Its cover showed signs of frequent use. The corners were worn, the pages bent. Whatever was inside mattered. He carefully opened it. His heartbeat slowed, then stopped. The first page contained names. Dozens of names. Some marked with small hearts. Others marked with bold X's. Marcus frowned. He turned another page. More names. Another page. More. A note had been written at the top of one section. VIPs. Below it sat a list. Technology executives, real estate brokers, influencers, local politicians, business owners, people who spent money, people who posted photos online, people Tiffany considered valuable. Beside nearly every name sat a heart. The next section chilled him. Slow service. The title had been underlined twice. Underneath sat another list. Walter Jenkins, old veteran, stays too long, heartless. Sandra Morris, 3 kids, makes noise. Ex-Michael T. construction worker, dirty boots. Ex-Marcus kept reading. Each note became worse, more personal, more cruel, more revealing. They weren't tracking customers. They were judging them, sorting them, ranking them, deciding who deserved kindness and who didn't. Marcus turned another page, then froze. There it was. Flannel guy, old jacket, counts change, acts like he belongs here. X. Marcus stared at the words. That was him. The day he entered as a customer. The day they mocked him. The day they spilled his coffee. He had been added to the list like an unwanted item on inventory. Not a person. Not a customer. Not a human being. An inconvenience. A problem. An X. Marcus slowly closed the journal. For several moments, he simply stood there. The sounds of the cafe faded. The smell of coffee disappeared. All he could think about was his mother. That rainy day years ago. The bus stop. The hot chocolate. The look in her eyes when strangers decided she didn't belong. The same thing was happening again. Not by accident. Not occasionally. Systematically. The journal wasn't evidence of a bad day. It was evidence of a culture. A system. A deliberate process. He carefully returned the journal exactly where he found it, then stepped away. His expression remained calm. But inside, something had shifted. The problem was far worse than rude employees. Much worse. The rest of the afternoon only confirmed it. Marcus watched Tiffany greet a young executive by name before he even reached the counter. She offered him a free pastry, a complimentary upgrade, a smile bright enough to light the room. 10 minutes later, an elderly woman approached. Gray hair, cane, slow steps. The smile vanished. "What can I get you?" No greeting, no warmth, no patience. The contrast was impossible to miss. Marcus watched the woman struggle with her wallet. Tiffany sighed audibly. The customer apologized. Actually apologized. For taking too long. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. Not explosive anger, something deeper. The anger that comes when people forget another person's dignity. Later that evening, he found himself working beside Danielle again. The kitchen glowed beneath warm yellow lights. Outside, the sky darkened over Seattle. Rain clouds gathered once more. Danielle carefully boxed pastries for the next morning. Marcus decided to ask a question. "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 4 years." Marcus nodded. "You like it?" The answer took longer than expected. Danielle continued working. Folding boxes, labeling trays, avoiding eye contact. Finally, she spoke. "I like making people happy." That wasn't an answer. Marcus noticed. "So that's a yes?" A small smile appeared, then disappeared. "I like the customers." Marcus leaned against the counter. "What about management?" Silence. Danielle sealed another box, then another, then another. Finally, she shrugged. "Management likes results." Something about the way she said it felt important. Marcus let the silence breathe. Sometimes people reveal more when they don't feel pressured. A few moments later, Danielle opened her locker. A notebook fell onto the floor. Marcus recognized it immediately. The notebook he'd seen earlier. Pages spilled open. Handwritten notes filled every inch. Recipes, ideas, flavor combinations, sketches, concepts, months, maybe years, of work. Danielle quickly picked it up, almost too quickly. "You okay?" Marcus asked. She nodded. "Yeah." Her voice sounded protective. The way people sound when something precious is nearly exposed. Marcus smiled. "You create all those?" Danielle hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes." He pointed toward one page. Autumn maple cream roll, another. Cinnamon peach Danish, another. Salted honey croissant. The ideas seemed endless, professional, innovative. Marcus recognized several products immediately. Some were already sold in Iron Seat locations. Others weren't. A strange feeling settled over him. "These are good." Danielle laughed softly. "Maybe." "No." "Really?" She looked away. The compliment seemed to make her uncomfortable, as if praise wasn't something she received often. Before Marcus could ask more questions, voices echoed from the hallway. Tiffany. Chloe. The moment Danielle heard them, her shoulders tightened. Only slightly. But Marcus noticed. People don't brace themselves around people they trust. The two women entered. Neither acknowledged Danielle. Tiffany grabbed a pastry from a tray, bit into it, then frowned. This recipe still needs work. Danielle blinked. Actually, customers love that one. Tiffany shrugged. Maybe. Then she walked away. No thank you. No respect. No acknowledgement that Danielle had baked every item in the room. Marcus watched Danielle's face. Not anger, not surprise. Resignation. The same expression his mother wore years ago. The expression of someone accustomed to being overlooked. The realization hit him hard. The customer problem wasn't separate from the employee problem. They were connected. People willing to dehumanize customers often dehumanized coworkers too. The system was bigger than he thought. Much bigger. When his shift finally ended, Marcus stepped outside. Night had fallen. Rain began again. The city lights blurred across wet streets. Traffic moved slowly beneath glowing signs. Seattle looked beautiful and lonely. He stood beneath the awning and pulled out his phone. The notes file had grown longer every day. Customer discrimination, VIP lists, targeted slow service, employee mistreatment, Danielle, the notebook, the schedules, the patterns. Yet one question remained unanswered. Who was protecting all of this? Tiffany wasn't smart enough to build a system this organized. Neither was Chloe. Someone above them knew. Someone above them approved. Someone above them benefited. As if on cue, the front door opened behind him. A black SUV pulled into the loading zone. A tall man stepped out. Expensive coat. Expensive shoes. Expensive confidence. Employees immediately straightened. Tiffany practically lit up. Chloe smiled. Danielle lowered her eyes and returned to work. The reaction told Marcus everything. This man mattered. The newcomer walked into the cafe like he owned it. Marcus watched through the glass. The man laughed with Tiffany, ignored Danielle completely, then disappeared into the manager's office. Marcus pulled out his phone, opened the employee directory, found the photograph. The same face, the same smile. Richard Hale, regional manager. The man responsible for overseeing multiple stores. The man whose name appeared repeatedly in internal reports. The man Danielle never mentioned directly. Marcus stared through the window. Richard laughed at something Tiffany said. The three of them looked entirely too comfortable together. A cold certainty settled inside him. He had finally found the next piece of the puzzle. And whatever Richard Hale was hiding would likely explain everything. The next morning arrived under a sky the color of steel. Low clouds hung over Seattle. A cold wind moved through the streets. People hurried into buildings carrying umbrellas and paper coffee cups. Inside Iron Seat Coffee, the smell of cinnamon and fresh bread filled the air before sunrise. Marcus arrived through the employee entrance at 5:15 a.m. Danielle was already there. Of course she was. The lights in the kitchen glowed warmly against the darkness outside. Flour dusted the front of her apron. Several trays of pastries cooled on metal racks. Soft jazz drifted through the speakers. The cafe felt peaceful before customers arrived. It felt like a completely different place. A better place. Marcus watched Danielle work. She moved with confidence. Not the confidence of someone seeking attention. The confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Every motion was efficient. Every detail mattered. The ovens, the ingredients, the timing, the presentation. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was careless. For nearly an hour they worked in silence. Eventually Marcus spoke. "Do you ever take a day off?" Danielle laughed softly. "Sometimes." "You don't sound convinced." "I usually cover for somebody." Marcus shook his head. "You know that's not really a day off." Danielle smiled. "Probably not." The smile disappeared almost immediately, like she had trained herself not to enjoy things for too long. Marcus had seen that before. People who spent years being overlooked often learned to shrink themselves, not because they lacked talent, because they stopped expecting recognition. The morning rush began shortly after 6:30. Customers poured into the store. Many ordered pastries. Many specifically asked for certain items: the maple rolls, the peach danishes, the cinnamon twists. Marcus noticed something. Customers loved Danielle's creations, absolutely loved them. Several even mentioned specific products by name. One woman approached the counter carrying a pastry box. "Whoever created these maple rolls is a genius." Danielle happened to be stocking a display nearby. The compliment floated right past her. Straight to Tiffany. Tiffany smiled proudly. "I'll pass that along." Then she didn't. Not even a glance toward Danielle. Not even a nod. Nothing. Marcus watched the exchange carefully. The woman left happy. Danielle continued working, and Tiffany accepted praise she had done absolutely nothing to earn. The moment bothered him far more than he expected, because it wasn't just about credit. It was about erasure. Someone had taken Danielle's contributions and made them invisible. That afternoon, Richard Hale returned. The regional manager entered with the same polished smile, the same expensive coat, the same effortless confidence. Employees immediately noticed. Tiffany nearly sprinted to greet him. Chloe followed seconds later. Meanwhile, Danielle remained in the kitchen. Marcus couldn't ignore the contrast. Richard shook hands with managers, complimented Tiffany, complimented Chloe, then walked directly past Danielle without acknowledging her existence. Not even a hello. The woman responsible for half the products customers loved might as well have been a ghost. Marcus felt anger stirring again. Quiet anger. The dangerous kind. The kind that waits, the kind that collects evidence. Later that afternoon, Richard gathered several employees near the counter. A marketing representative had arrived from corporate. The conversation centered around seasonal menu planning. Richard smiled broadly. "As everyone knows, our autumn maple collection has been one of the most successful launches in company history." The representative nodded. "We've been very impressed." Richard folded his arms proudly. "It was a concept I developed last year." Marcus froze. Across the room, Danielle did not react, at least not visibly. She continued arranging pastries, but Marcus saw her shoulders tighten, just slightly. Richard continued speaking. "The original recipe took months to perfect." The representative smiled. "You should be proud." Richard accepted the compliment without hesitation, without guilt, without shame. Marcus looked toward Danielle. Her eyes never left the tray she was organizing, but something in her expression changed. A sadness. Small, quiet, familiar. The sadness of hearing someone rewrite your story while you're forced to stand there and listen. That evening, after the cafe closed, Marcus found Danielle sitting alone in the break room. Most employees had gone home. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room felt peaceful. For the first time all day, Danielle looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Marcus sat across from her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then he nodded toward her notebook. You spend a lot of time on that thing. Danielle glanced down. The notebook rested on the table beside her. Her fingers instinctively moved toward it. Protective. Almost defensive. It's just ideas. Looks like more than ideas. A faint smile appeared. Maybe? Marcus waited. Eventually, she opened the notebook. Page after page revealed handwritten recipes, flavor combinations, sketches, product concepts, notes, observations, dreams, years of work. Marcus turned pages carefully. The quality stunned him. These weren't random thoughts. This was professional development, innovation, creativity, vision. Then he found something. An old page, dated nearly 2 years earlier, autumn maple roll. His eyes widened. The recipe, the company's best-selling seasonal pastry, the one Richard claimed he created. Marcus looked at the date. Then another page. Winter cinnamon twist. Another successful product. Another early date. Another and another. His pulse quickened. Every major item Richard publicly claimed appeared first in Danielle's notebook. Months earlier, sometimes nearly a year earlier. The evidence sat right in front of him. Danielle noticed his expression. Her smile faded. You see it now. Marcus slowly closed the notebook. You created all of these. She stared toward the rain-streaked window. For a long time she said nothing. Then she nodded. Most of them. The words came quietly, without bitterness, without self-pity, which somehow made them hurt more. Marcus leaned forward. Why haven't you done something? Danielle laughed. Not because it was funny, because it wasn't. I tried. The answer landed heavily. She opened a drawer beside the table. Inside sat a stack of folders, neatly organized, carefully labeled. Marcus immediately understood. Complaints, records, documentation, years of effort, years of being ignored. Danielle slid one folder across the table. Marcus opened it. Formal complaint. Request for review. Recipe attribution concern. No action taken. Another folder. No action taken. Another. No action taken. Another. No action taken. The same phrase appeared repeatedly, like a stamp, like a wall, like a door that never opened. Marcus felt something twist inside him, not because Danielle had been denied recognition, because she had stopped expecting it. That was worse. Much worse. People can survive disappointment. What destroys them is learning not to hope. Danielle gently collected the folders. I stopped filing reports last year. Marcus looked up. Why? She shrugged. A tired shrug. The kind people develop after losing the same fight too many times. Nobody reads them. The room fell silent. Rain continued outside. The city lights blurred through the glass. Then Danielle did something unexpected. She smiled. A genuine smile. Small but real. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Marcus stared at her. It clearly mattered. The products mattered. The work mattered. She mattered. Yet somewhere along the way, she'd been convinced otherwise. The realization hurt more than he expected, because it reminded him of his mother. Years of hard work. Years of sacrifice. Years of people benefiting from her labor without truly seeing her. Marcus suddenly understood something. The biggest victim in this story wasn't him. Not really. Yes, he had been humiliated. Yes, he had been judged. But Danielle had been living inside this system every day, for years. And despite everything, she still showed up before sunrise. Still created beautiful things. still treated customers with kindness, still cared. The strength required for that humbled him. As they prepared to leave, Danielle gathered several boxes of unsold pastries. Marcus frowned. "What are those for?" She smiled. "The shelter." "The shelter?" She nodded. "There's a community kitchen a few blocks away." Marcus remembered Arthur. The shelter, the bus stop, the hospital. A strange feeling settled over him. "What do you do there?" Danielle adjusted the boxes in her arms. "Mostly hand out food." "After working all day?" She shrugged again. The same modest shrug. No reason to waste good food. Marcus watched her walk toward the door. The rain had started again. Cold, steady, Seattle rain. Before leaving, Danielle looked back. "You coming?" Marcus blinked. "Where?" "The shelter." For a moment he hesitated. Then he smiled. "Yeah." Danielle opened the door. Cold air rushed inside. Together they stepped into the rain. Neither of them knew that before the night was over, Marcus would see something that connected Danielle to Arthur. And that connection would reveal an entirely new side of the woman everyone else seemed determined to overlook. Rain drizzled softly over Seattle as they walked through downtown. Streetlights reflected in puddles. Traffic moved slowly beneath glowing neon signs. The city felt quieter at night, more honest. Marcus carried 2 boxes of pastries. Danielle carried 3. Neither complained. Neither rushed. A few blocks from the cafe, they reached a modest brick building tucked between an old church and a parking garage. A simple sign hung above the entrance. Community Hope Kitchen. Warm yellow light spilled onto the sidewalk. Laughter drifted through the open doors. The smell of soup floated into the rainy night. Marcus followed Danielle inside. The room was crowded. Families, retirees, veterans, people down on their luck, people trying to get back on their feet, people society often forgot. Yet inside this room, they weren't invisible. Volunteers greeted them by name. Someone waved to Danielle. Another volunteer hurried over. "You're late." Danielle laughed. "Busy day." The woman smiled. "We saved your spot." Marcus watched carefully. This wasn't her first visit, not her second, not her 10th. She moved through the room like family, comfortably, naturally, as if she belonged here, because she did. Within minutes, she was helping serve food, greeting guests, checking on elderly visitors, making sure everyone received enough to eat. Marcus noticed something. She treated every person exactly the same. The retired teacher, the unemployed mechanic, the teenager, the veteran, the single mother, the homeless man. Everyone received the same smile, the same respect, the same dignity. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Some people decide who you are before they meet you." Danielle seemed to do the opposite. She met people before deciding anything. An hour passed, then another. The rain continued outside. The kitchen slowly emptied. Guests finished meals, volunteers cleaned tables. Marcus carried trays toward the back room. As he returned, movement near the entrance caught his eye. A familiar figure stepped inside. Gray beard, weathered coat, old backpack. Arthur, the old man from the bus stop. Marcus froze. Arthur looked healthier than before. Still tired, still carrying the weight of hard years, but healthier. The moment Danielle spotted him, her face brightened. "Arthur." Arthur smiled immediately. "There she is." The warmth between them surprised Marcus. Danielle walked over carrying a fresh plate. "No arguments tonight." Arthur laughed. I wasn't going to argue. That's a lie. Arthur shrugged. Maybe a little. She set the food down in front of him. Soup, bread, a slice of pie. Arthur looked genuinely touched. You always give me too much. You always say that. And you're always wrong. The two shared an easy familiarity, the kind built through consistency, not grand gestures, small acts repeated over time. Marcus watched quietly. Arthur noticed him moments later. His eyes widened. Marcus. Marcus smiled. Good to see you. Arthur laughed. Looks like we keep running into each other. Danielle looked between them. You two know each other? Marcus nodded. We met a few days ago. Arthur smiled. He saved my life. Danielle blinked. What? Marcus immediately shook his head. It wasn't like that. Arthur ignored him. Collapsed at a bus stop. Danielle's expression softened. She looked at Marcus differently now. Not with admiration, with understanding. As if a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. The three spent the next hour talking. Simple conversation. Nothing dramatic. Stories, memories, small jokes. For the first time since beginning his investigation, Marcus found himself relaxing. Then something unexpected happened. A volunteer turned on the television mounted near the dining area. Local news. Most people ignored it. Arthur didn't. The moment the screen lit up, something changed. His eyes fixed on it, intensely, almost nervously. Marcus noticed. So did Danielle. The news segment shifted to a story about commercial real estate, a large development project downtown. Several photographs flashed across the screen. Business leaders, investors, developers. Then one image appeared for less than 2 seconds. Arthur immediately looked away. Danielle noticed. Marcus noticed. Neither said anything. But the reaction felt strange. Very strange. A few minutes later, Arthur quietly excused himself. He stepped outside. Alone. Marcus watched him go. Something about the moment bothered him. After a brief hesitation, he followed. The rain had almost stopped. Cool mist hung in the air. Arthur stood beneath a street lamp. His hand reached into his coat pocket. He removed the same worn business card Marcus had seen before. The old man stared at it. Longer this time. The streetlight illuminated faded lettering. Marcus couldn't read the words, but he could see Arthur's expression. Regret, loss, memory, the look of someone staring at a former life. Arthur sensed movement, quickly returning the card to his pocket. You move quietly. Marcus smiled. So do you. Arthur laughed softly. For a while they stood together watching traffic pass. Eventually Marcus asked the question. Who are you really? Arthur's smile faded. Not defensively. Sadly. The old man looked toward the city skyline. The towers, the lights, the buildings. Something passed across his face. A lifetime, perhaps. Then he shook his head. Not tonight. Marcus didn't push. People revealed themselves when ready, not before. Arthur seemed grateful for that. You know, Arthur said quietly, most people think money changes everything. Marcus glanced at him. You don't? Arthur smiled faintly. No. The answer sounded personal. Painfully personal. Before Marcus could respond, the shelter door opened. Danielle stepped outside. You two hiding? Arthur immediately brightened. The sadness vanished. Maybe. Danielle laughed. Come back inside. Arthur pointed toward the door. See? Bossy. She rolled her eyes. Food gets cold. Arthur sighed dramatically. Fine. The moment passed, but Marcus couldn't forget it. Something wasn't adding up. Arthur carried himself differently from most homeless men he'd known. His speech, his posture, his observations, even the way he studied the city. Everything suggested a man who once lived a very different life. The mystery deepened over the following week. Arthur began appearing at the cafe occasionally, always quietly, always politely, never asking for anything. Danielle always found a way to help. A cup of coffee, a pastry, a warm conversation, nothing extravagant, just kindness. The sort of kindness Marcus rarely saw anymore. Then everything changed. It happened on a Thursday morning. The cafe was crowded. Rain hammered against the windows. Customers filled nearly every table. Arthur entered around 8:30. His coat looked wetter than usual. His hands trembled slightly from the cold. Danielle noticed immediately. She quietly prepared breakfast. A coffee, a pastry, nothing expensive, nothing unusual. She placed it on the counter. Arthur smiled. Then Tiffany saw it. The entire atmosphere shifted. What is that? Danielle froze. Arthur looked down. Tiffany approached. Her voice carried farther than she realized. You're giving away food again? Several customers glanced over. Danielle remained calm. It's leftover inventory. Tiffany folded her arms. That's not your decision. Arthur slowly stood. It's okay. Tiffany ignored him. No. Actually, it's not. The room grew quieter. Marcus watched from across the cafe. A familiar tension tightened inside him. The same tension he felt the day they mocked him. The same cruelty. Different target. Same behavior. Tiffany looked directly at Arthur. You come in here every week. Arthur remained silent. You sit for hours. Still silent. And now employees are giving away free food? Several customers looked uncomfortable. Arthur lowered his eyes. Not ashamed. Tired. Marcus recognized the difference. Tiffany continued. We're running a business. The silence became painful. Danielle stepped forward. He hasn't done anything wrong. Tiffany scoffed. That's not the point. Arthur gently placed the coffee back on the counter. Then he reached into his coat. Slowly, carefully. He removed the worn business card. The same card. The one Marcus had seen before. The one Arthur always carried. For a moment, Arthur simply stared at it. The entire cafe seemed frozen. Then he looked up. Not at Tiffany. Not at Danielle. At the card, as if it represented something he'd lost. Something important. Something painful. Nobody understood what it meant. Not yet. But Marcus suddenly felt certain. The secret Arthur carried was far bigger than anyone imagined, and sooner or later, that secret was going to change everything. For now, however, another life was about to be shattered first. Rain pounded Seattle through most of the night. Wind rattled windows across downtown. The storm seemed determined to wash the city clean, but some stains ran deeper than rain could reach. Marcus arrived before sunrise. The cafe felt unusually tense, even before a single customer entered. The atmosphere reminded him of the moments before a thunderstorm. Everything looked normal. Nothing felt normal. Danielle stood alone in the kitchen preparing pastries. She looked tired, more tired than usual. The confrontation with Arthur had clearly affected her. Not because of Tiffany. Danielle was used to Tiffany. What bothered her was seeing someone kind humiliated for no reason. Marcus understood that feeling. People like Danielle often carried the pain of others as if it belonged to them. That morning Arthur didn't appear. Neither did the next day, or the day after that. Danielle tried not to show concern. She failed. Every time the front door opened, her eyes lifted. Every time. Then settled again. Disappointed. Marcus noticed. By Friday morning, even he had begun wondering where Arthur had gone. The answer arrived around 10:30. The cafe was busy. Every table occupied. Steam rose from fresh coffee. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted through the room. Outside, rain streaked across the large front windows. Then the door opened. Arthur stepped inside. The room immediately felt brighter, at least to Danielle. Her face relaxed for the first time all morning. "There you are." Arthur smiled weakly. "Miss me?" "A little?" "A little? Maybe more than a little." Arthur laughed. The sound warmed the room. Even Marcus found himself smiling. The old man looked better than he had the week before. Cleaner, healthier, but there was still something fragile about him. Something lonely. Danielle quietly prepared his usual breakfast. Coffee, pastry, nothing fancy. Just enough. The sort of kindness she offered without making a show of it. Arthur sat at his usual table near the window. Rain blurred the city behind him. For a brief moment, everything felt peaceful. Then Richard Hale walked through the front door. The atmosphere changed instantly. Tiffany practically lit up. Chloe straightened her apron. Managers suddenly became very busy looking productive. Richard carried the same expensive coat, the same confident smile, the same air of someone accustomed to power. Marcus watched carefully. Richard immediately spotted Arthur. His expression darkened. Just slightly. But enough. He leaned toward Tiffany, asked something. Tiffany answered. Richard's jaw tightened. Then he turned toward Danielle and began walking. Marcus already knew this wouldn't end well. Richard stopped beside the counter. "Danielle." Her smile faded. "Morning. We need to talk." The tone alone made several employees uncomfortable. Danielle set down the coffee cup she was holding. "What about?" Richard folded his arms. "I've received reports." The words sounded rehearsed. Prepared. Dangerous. Danielle blinked. "What reports?" Richard glanced toward Arthur, then back at her. Unauthorized product distribution. The room seemed to freeze. Several employees stopped moving. Even customers sensed something happening. Danielle stared, confused, then hurt. "You mean the leftover food?" Richard nodded. "Company property." Marcus felt anger rise immediately. Arthur looked down at his table. His shoulders slowly lowered, as though he already blamed himself. Danielle stood silent for several seconds, then spoke carefully. "The food was going to be thrown away. That's not your decision. I've been doing it for years." Richard shrugged. "Then you've been violating policy for years." The cruelty wasn't loud. That made it worse. Danielle looked genuinely stunned. Marcus realized why. She wasn't expecting kindness, but she was expecting fairness, and fairness wasn't coming. Richard pulled a folder from beneath his arm. The sight made Marcus's stomach tighten. Paperwork. Official paperwork. Prepared before this conversation ever began. The decision had already been made. Richard placed the folder on the counter. "Effective immediately, you're suspended pending review." The words landed like stones. Silence filled the cafe. Even Tiffany seemed surprised, though not upset. Just surprised. Danielle stared at the folder. Her hands trembled slightly. Not dramatically, just enough. The kind of trembling people get when reality shifts beneath their feet. Marcus wanted to step forward, to say something, to stop it. But he couldn't. Not yet. If he revealed himself now, the truth would remain buried. The entire system would survive. The investigation wasn't finished. So he remained where he stood, and hated himself for it. Danielle looked at Richard, then at the folder, then at Arthur. Finally, she asked a simple question. Who complained? Richard didn't answer. That answer was answer enough. Nobody complained. This wasn't about policy. This wasn't about food. This was about removing someone. Arthur slowly stood. This is my fault. Danielle immediately shook her head. No. It is. No. Arthur's voice cracked. If I hadn't come here. Arthur. The old man fell silent. The sadness in his eyes hurt Marcus more than Richard's accusations, because Arthur genuinely believed he was causing harm, when all he'd done was exist. The same crime Marcus committed when he entered the cafe weeks earlier. The same crime countless customers committed every day. Being present, being different, being inconvenient. Richard pushed the folder slightly closer. Please clean out your locker. The words felt final, cold, mechanical. Danielle stared at the paperwork. Then something surprising happened. She smiled. Not happily, not sarcastically, sadly, like someone finally accepting what they already knew. Marcus had seen that smile before. His mother wore it once, years ago. The day she lost a job she'd given everything to. The smile of a person realizing loyalty was never going to be returned. Danielle removed her apron, folded it neatly, placed it on the counter. No argument. No scene. No begging. Just dignity, pure dignity. The room watched silently. Customers, employees, everyone. Nobody knew what to say. Arthur's eyes glistened. Marcus could barely breathe. Danielle picked up her bag, then walked toward the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a small cardboard box. Inside sat her notebook. The notebook containing years of ideas, years of recipes, years of dreams, the only thing she truly cared about taking. She stopped near Arthur's table. The old man stood, looking heartbroken. Danielle smiled softly. It's okay. Arthur shook his head. No, it isn't. She reached out and squeezed his shoulder. One simple gesture. One act of comfort. Yet somehow she was comforting him, not the other way around. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Because that's who Danielle was. Even while losing everything, she worried about someone else. Outside, rain hammered the sidewalk. Danielle opened the front door. Cold air rushed inside. For a moment, she paused beneath the entrance, looking back at the cafe, the ovens, the tables, the windows, the place where she'd spent 4 years of her life. Then she stepped into the rain and walked away. No umbrella, no destination, just rain and heartbreak. Marcus watched through the glass. She disappeared slowly beneath neon reflections and traffic lights. The city swallowed her. Arthur remained frozen beside the window, looking out at the storm. Marcus had never seen him appear older. The room felt different now. Empty, as though something important had left. Because it had. Richard adjusted his coat. Satisfied. Businesslike. Finished. Then he turned and walked toward the office. Tiffany followed. Chloe followed, laughing quietly, as if nothing significant had happened, as if a life hadn't just been overturned. Marcus stood alone beside the pastry display. The anger inside him had changed. Before it was suspicion. Now it was certainty. The system was rotten, completely rotten. And for the first time since beginning his investigation, Marcus knew exactly what needed to happen next. That night, after the cafe closed, he sat alone in his apartment overlooking Seattle. Rain streaked the windows. Traffic lights blinked below. His laptop glowed in the darkness. Evidence covered the screen. The journal, the customer lists, the stolen recipes, the complaints, the schedules, the suspensions, the lies. Hours passed. Then Marcus picked up his phone and made a call. Not as Michael Brooks, not as an employee, as Marcus Reed, founder, owner, the man who built everything. The voice answered immediately. Marcus, I need everyone there. A pause. What happened? Marcus stared out at the rain, his expression hard as stone. Friday. Another pause. Everyone? Everyone. Silence, then. You finally have enough evidence? Marcus thought about Danielle walking into the storm, about Arthur standing alone beside the window, about his mother, about the promise that built the company. More than enough. He ended the call, then looked toward the city. By this time next week, everything would be different. The lies, the theft, the humiliation, the cruelty. All of it was about to come into the light. And Marcus Reed was finally ready to stop being invisible. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Seattle woke beneath a blanket of clouds. Rain lingered in the air, but never fully fell. The city seemed suspended between storms. At exactly 7:30 in the morning, employees began arriving at the flagship Iron Seat coffee location. Nobody knew why they had been called in. The cafe was closed to customers. The lights were on. The chairs remained empty. A printed notice on the front door simply read, "Mandatory staff meeting. Attendance required." Inside, confusion spread quickly. Employees whispered. Managers exchanged nervous looks. Nobody had received an explanation. Tiffany arrived first. Designer sunglasses, coffee in hand. Completely unconcerned. "What is this about?" she asked Chloe. Chloe shrugged. "No clue. Probably another corporate training thing." Both laughed. Neither appeared worried. Why would they? For years, nobody had challenged them. For years, complaints disappeared. For years, consequences never arrived. Richard Hale entered a few minutes later, confident as always. Perfect haircut, perfect suit, perfect smile. He looked mildly annoyed about losing part of his morning. Nothing more. The employees gathered inside a conference room located behind the cafe. It wasn't large. 12 chairs, a projection screen, a long table, cheap fluorescent lighting. The kind of room people forgot as soon as they left it. Today would be different. Today nobody would forget. At exactly 8 o'clock, the door opened. Several corporate representatives entered first. Human resources, legal advisors, operations managers. The room immediately grew quieter. Tiffany frowned. Richard's confidence shifted slightly. Not fear, just curiosity. Then another person entered. A man wearing a faded jacket, plain glasses, work boots. The same employee everyone knew as Michael Brooks. A few people looked confused. Why was he here? Richard barely glanced at him. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Marcus walked calmly to the front of the room, then stopped. Silence settled over the space. Nobody understood what they were seeing. Not yet. Marcus slowly removed his glasses. Then he removed the employee name tag. Michael Brooks disappeared. The room watched, confused, waiting. Marcus looked at every face, one by one. The nervous employees, the managers, Tiffany, Chloe, Richard. Finally, he spoke. His voice remained calm, steady, controlled. 4 weeks ago, I walked into this cafe as a customer. The room remained silent. I ordered a cortado. Several employees exchanged glances. Tiffany's smile disappeared. Marcus continued. I was mocked. Nobody moved. I was judged. The room grew quieter. I was treated as though I didn't belong. A strange expression crossed Tiffany's face. Recognition. Slow. Painful. Unavoidable. Marcus stepped aside. A photograph appeared on the screen behind him. An old photograph. A young black man standing beside a tiny coffee cart. Rainy Seattle streets in the background. A handwritten sign hanging from the cart. Everyone deserves a seat. The room froze. Completely. Nobody breathed. Nobody blinked. Marcus looked toward the screen, then back toward the employees. My name is Marcus Reed. The words landed like thunder. I founded Iron Seat Coffee. Absolute silence. Chloe's mouth fell open. Tiffany's face turned pale. Richard sat perfectly still. For a moment, nobody seemed capable of processing what they had just heard. Marcus continued. 23 years ago, I built my first coffee cart with money my mother saved while working as a night janitor. The screen changed. More photographs, old storefronts, construction pictures, historic company images. The story of Iron Seat Coffee. The story nobody inside that room had ever bothered learning. I built this company on a promise. Marcus paused. The slogan appeared behind him. Everyone deserves a seat. Several employees lowered their eyes. Because now they understood. Now they remembered. Now they saw exactly who had been standing in front of them all along. Marcus looked directly at Tiffany. You remember me? Her face drained completely. She nodded slightly. Unable to speak, Marcus's voice remained calm. That made it worse. Do you remember what happened? No answer. The silence answered for her. I do. The screen changed again. A photograph appeared. The black journal, pages filled with names, hearts, X's, customer rankings. Gasps spread across the room. Marcus let everyone read it. Slow service, unwanted customers, people marked as problems, people marked as unworthy, people marked with X's. The room shifted uneasily. Marcus looked toward Tiffany and Chloe. Would either of you like to explain this? Neither answered. Neither could. The evidence spoke for itself. The next slide appeared. Customer reviews. Hundreds of them. Words highlighted in red. Ignored. Disrespected. Humiliated. Unwelcome. Marcus allowed the room to absorb them. Then came another slide. Employee schedules. Danielle's name. Opening shifts. Closing shifts. Months of undesirable assignments. Again and again and again. Richard's expression tightened. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Marcus noticed. So did everyone else. Then came the final set of slides. Danielle's notebook, recipe dates, product launches, corporate submissions, side by side. Impossible to deny. Autumn maple roll, winter cinnamon twist, honey peach Danish. Every successful product, every creation, every idea. Danielle first, Richard later. The dates told the story. The room stared at the screen. Several employees gasped. One manager whispered something under his breath. Another shook her head. Richard finally stood. I can explain. Marcus looked at him. For several seconds he said nothing. Then, please do. Richard swallowed. The confidence was gone now. Completely gone. Recipe development is collaborative. Nobody believed him. Not even himself. Marcus clicked another slide. Formal complaints appeared. Danielle's complaints. Ignored. Dismissed. Buried. Every single one signed by Richard Hale. The room fell silent again. The evidence had become overwhelming. No arguments remained. No excuses remained. No escape remained. Richard slowly sat back down, defeated. For the first time since Marcus met him, he looked small, very small. Marcus turned away from the screen, then looked toward the empty chair near the front. One chair, reserved, waiting. A chair nobody understood. Yet. Marcus glanced toward the conference room door, then toward the employees, then back toward the door. A faint smile appeared, the first genuine smile of the morning. Everything you've seen so far is true. The room chow remained frozen. But there is one more person you need to meet. Confused looks spread immediately. One more person? Who? Why? Marcus looked directly at Tiffany. Then Chloe? Then Richard. His smile disappeared. The biggest surprise of today hasn't even walked into this room yet. As if on cue, someone knocked on the conference room door. 3 soft knocks. Every head turned. The handle slowly began to move, and the moment it opened, every life in that room was about to change forever. The conference room door swung open. For a second, nobody reacted. Nobody understood. Nobody expected what they saw. An elderly man stepped inside. Gray beard, weathered coat, old boots, worn backpack. Arthur. The same man Tiffany had dismissed. The same man Chloe had ignored. The same man Danielle had quietly fed. The same man most people assumed was homeless. The room fell silent. Not confused silence. Disappointed silence. Several employees looked puzzled. This was the surprise. This man. Tiffany actually looked relieved. Marcus noticed immediately. She thought the danger had passed. She thought Arthur was irrelevant. She was wrong. Arthur walked slowly toward the empty chair near the front. Every step seemed deliberate, measured, calm. He sat down, folded his hands, and waited. The silence stretched. Finally, Richard frowned. I'm sorry. His voice sounded uncertain. But who exactly is this? Arthur smiled, not angrily, not smugly, just patiently. The way a grandfather smiles when a child asks a question with an obvious answer. Marcus stepped beside him, then looked around the room. I'd like everyone to meet Arthur Whitmore. The name landed softly. No reaction. Most employees had never heard it before. Then Marcus clicked a button. A photograph appeared on the screen. A much younger Arthur, standing in front of a skyscraper, wearing an expensive suit, shaking hands with the governor of Washington. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. Arthur watched quietly. Marcus clicked again. Another photograph. business magazines, corporate awards, investment conferences, national news appearances, more photographs, more headlines, more recognition. The room began to change. Confusion became disbelief. Disbelief became shock. One employee whispered, another gasped. Tiffany's face slowly lost color. Richard leaned forward, trying to understand, trying to reject what he was seeing, trying and failing. Marcus finally spoke. Arthur Whitmore built one of the largest commercial real estate companies in the Pacific Northwest. Nobody breathed. He spent 30 years investing in businesses across Seattle. Marcus clicked again. A final image appeared. A newspaper article. 20 years old. The headline read, "Local Investor Saves Growing Coffee Company." Beneath the headline stood two men, a young Marcus Reed and a younger Arthur Whitmore. The room exploded with whispers. Employees looked from the screen to Arthur, then back again, trying desperately to connect the billionaire in the photograph with the elderly man sitting quietly in front of them. Arthur lowered his eyes. He never seemed comfortable discussing his past. Marcus continued. 20 years ago, when Iron Seat Coffee was 6 weeks away from bankruptcy, every investor said no. The room listened. Every bank said no. Another pause. Every opportunity disappeared. Marcus looked toward Arthur, except one. Arthur smiled faintly. The same humble smile Marcus had seen at the shelter. The same smile Danielle had seen over countless cups of coffee. Marcus continued. Arthur invested when nobody else would. The room remained frozen. He believed in the company. Marcus paused. He believed in me. No one spoke. No one moved. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Rain tapped against distant windows. Everything else disappeared. Only the truth remained. Richard finally found his voice. "This isn't possible." Arthur looked at him. "It is." The simplicity of the answer somehow made it more devastating. Richard's face tightened. "But why?" Arthur glanced down at his worn coat, then smiled. "Life happens." The answer carried decades of history. Loss, pain, choices, lessons. Marcus knew better than to ask for more. Arthur shared only what he wished to share. And today wasn't about his story. It was about theirs. Marcus stepped forward. "The reason Arthur is here isn't because he's wealthy." He looked around the room. "It's because all of you already met him." Nobody needed clarification. Everyone knew. The coffee, the pastries, the insults, the judgment, the dismissal, the silence. Arthur had experienced it all. Marcus clicked another slide. Security photographs appeared. Arthur sitting alone. Arthur being ignored. Arthur waiting. Arthur looking down while Tiffany spoke harshly. The room became painfully uncomfortable. Even employees who had done nothing wrong looked ashamed. Arthur's voice finally broke the silence. "I never told anyone who I was. Everyone listened. I wanted to see people." His eyes moved slowly around the room. The real people. A pause. The people beneath the smiles. Nobody looked away. Arthur continued. "When people believe you have nothing to offer them," he glanced toward Tiffany, "they reveal themselves." The words struck harder than any accusation. Because they were true. Marcus clicked another slide. Tip records, scheduling records, recipe records, customer complaints, every piece of evidence, everything together. Impossible to deny. Impossible to explain away. Impossible to hide. Richard's shoulders slowly slumped. The fight left him. For the first time, Marcus saw fear. Real fear. Not fear of losing money. Fear of facing truth. Marcus looked directly at him. Would you like to explain why Danielle's recipes became yours? Richard remained silent. Marcus continued. Would you like to explain why her complaints disappeared? Nothing. Would you like to explain why customer discrimination was ignored? Still nothing. The silence answered every question. Marcus nodded slowly, then reached for 3 folders resting on the table. The room immediately understood. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Marcus handed the first folder to Tiffany. Her hands trembled. She stared at it, unable to speak. Marcus's voice remained calm. Tiffany Grant. He paused. Your employment with Iron Seat Coffee is terminated effective immediately. The room remained silent. No celebration, no applause, only consequences. Marcus handed the second folder to Chloe. The same applies to you. Chloe looked down. Tears formed, but nobody argued. Nobody could. The evidence was overwhelming. Then Marcus turned toward Richard. The room seemed to hold its breath. He placed the final folder in front of him. Richard Hale. A pause. For theft of intellectual property. Another pause. For suppression of employee complaints. Another. For abuse of managerial authority. The longest pause yet. And for helping create a culture that betrayed everything this company was built to represent. Richard closed his eyes. For a moment he looked exhausted. Old. Defeated. Then he slowly picked up the folder. The room watched. Nobody said a word. Marcus wasn't finished. Not even close. He looked toward the back of the room, toward the empty seat that should never have been empty, toward the place Danielle would have occupied had she not been suspended. A deep sadness crossed his face, because she deserved to be here. Arthur noticed. So did everyone else. Marcus took a breath, then spoke softly. The person most responsible for Iron Seat Coffee's success isn't in this room. The statement confused several employees. Marcus smiled. A genuine smile. The first hopeful smile of the morning. Which brings us to the final decision. Arthur stood. Slowly. Carefully. The room immediately focused on him. The old man adjusted his coat, looked around the room, then spoke. His voice was gentle, yet somehow carried more authority than any executive present. Everything Marcus showed you today matters. He paused. But none of it is the most important thing. The room waited. Arthur smiled. The most important thing is what happened after. Nobody understood. Not yet. Arthur's eyes softened. The person who treated me best in this entire company wasn't a manager. He glanced toward the empty chair. Wasn't an executive. A pause. Wasn't the founder. Another pause. It was Danielle. The room grew still. Arthur continued. She fed me when nobody was watching. His voice wavered slightly. She spoke to me when nobody cared. The silence deepened, and she treated me with dignity when she believed I had absolutely nothing to offer her. The words hung in the air. Beautiful. Painful. True. Arthur smiled sadly. That's the kind of person you build a company around. Marcus nodded. The room understood. Not completely, but enough. Arthur looked toward Marcus, then back toward everyone else. and finally said the words that would change Danielle's life forever. I think it's time she received everything that was taken from her. The room remained silent. Not because people didn't understand. Because they did. Every person sitting in that conference room understood exactly who Arthur was talking about. Danielle. The woman who arrived before sunrise. The woman who stayed after closing. The woman whose recipes built profits. The woman whose kindness never depended on who stood in front of her. The woman who wasn't even there to hear it. Arthur slowly sat down. The silence lingered. Then Marcus stood. For a moment he looked toward the empty chair near the back of the room. The chair Danielle should have occupied. The chair she had earned. The chair she had been denied. For years. Marcus took a deep breath. Then he smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes after carrying something heavy for too long. Let's go get her. Several employees blinked. The room shifted. Confused laughter appeared, then disappeared. Marcus wasn't joking. 20 minutes later, a black company SUV rolled through rainy Seattle streets. Marcus sat in the back seat. Arthur beside him. The city moved past the windows, wet sidewalks, coffee shops, apartment buildings, bus stops. The same city where a little boy once promised his mother he would build a place where everyone belonged. Now that promise was finally being repaired. Danielle lived in a modest apartment building near Beacon Hill. Nothing luxurious, nothing flashy. Just a clean building surrounded by small trees and narrow sidewalks. Rain dripped from the branches. Marcus climbed the stairs. Arthur followed. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint. Marcus stopped at apartment 3B, then knocked. A few seconds passed. The door opened. Danielle stood there. She looked surprised. Very surprised. Her eyes moved from Marcus to Arthur, then back again. For a moment she didn't speak. Neither did they. Finally she laughed softly. "What are you two doing here?" Arthur smiled. "Breaking company policy." Danielle frowned. "I don't work there anymore." Arthur's smile widened. "That's one of the things we're here to fix." Confusion spread across her face. Marcus noticed the notebook sitting on a small kitchen table behind her. The same notebook. Years of dreams. Years of ideas. Years of being overlooked. The sight made his chest tighten, because he knew how close she had come to giving up. Marcus stepped inside. The apartment was simple. Bookshelves, houseplants, a small dining table, photographs of family. Nothing extravagant. Yet somehow it felt warm, like home. The three sat together. For several moments nobody spoke. Then Marcus finally told her everything. The investigation. The journal, the customer lists, the complaints, the evidence, Richard, Tiffany, Chloe. Every piece of it. Danielle listened quietly. The room grew still. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Outside, Seattle moved through another gray afternoon. Inside, one woman's entire understanding of her life was changing. When Marcus finished, Danielle simply stared. Not shocked, not triumphant, just overwhelmed. Arthur gently slid a folder across the table, the same kind of folder used during the meeting. Danielle looked at it, then at Arthur, then at Marcus. "What is this?" Marcus smiled. "Open it." Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, from uncertainty. Slowly she opened the folder. Inside sat an official company offer. A promotion. Regional Director of Product Innovation. Overseeing menu development across every Iron Seat location. Danielle blinked, then blinked again, as if her eyes couldn't process the words. Marcus watched tears begin forming. Not dramatic tears. Quiet ones. The kind people fight to hold back. Arthur slid another document toward her. This one too. Danielle looked down. Her breath caught. Back compensation. 4 years. Recipe royalties. Lost bonuses. Missed promotions. Every dollar calculated. Every contribution recognized. Every theft corrected. Danielle covered her mouth. The room fell silent. Marcus looked away briefly, giving her privacy, giving her dignity. Some moments belong to people, not audiences, not applause, just people. When Danielle finally spoke, her voice barely worked. You did all this? Marcus shook his head. No. He glanced toward Arthur, then smiled. You did. Danielle frowned. Marcus pointed toward the notebook, the recipes, then toward Arthur, the kindness, then toward her, the perseverance. Arthur nodded. You earned every bit of it. The tears finally escaped, not because she was receiving something new, because she was receiving something that should have been hers all along. There is a difference, a very important difference. The room remained quiet. Outside, rain slowly stopped. Sunlight broke through clouds. Just a little. Enough to brighten the room, enough to feel symbolic. A few weeks later, Iron Seat Coffee looked different. Not on the outside. The same logo remained. The same storefronts, the same tables, the same windows. But inside, everything had changed. The customer ranking lists disappeared. The tip system became transparent. Employee complaints went directly to corporate review. Recognition programs launched company-wide. Every recipe now carried the creator's name. Every idea received credit. Every employee received a voice. And perhaps most importantly, every customer received dignity. No exceptions. Danielle's first day as regional director felt strangely ordinary, which was exactly how she wanted it. No grand speeches, no spotlight, no dramatic announcement, just work, meaningful work, the kind she had always loved. Only now nobody could steal it. Arthur continued visiting the flagship location, sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes 5. Never because he needed coffee, because he liked the people. Patricia from accounting always greeted him. The college students knew his favorite table. The baristas knew his order. The customers knew his name. He belonged. Marcus noticed that mattered more to Arthur than any fortune ever had. One crisp autumn morning, several months later, Marcus sat near the front window. The same window where Arthur often sat. The same kind of seat his mother was denied years ago. Outside, leaves drifted across wet sidewalks. Inside, warm light filled the cafe. Danielle stood behind the counter speaking with a new employee. Patient, encouraging, confident. The difference was remarkable. Not because she had changed, because she no longer needed to hide. Arthur sat nearby enjoying a pastry. A real smile rested on his face. Not the guarded smile Marcus first met at the bus stop. A peaceful one. The smile of someone finally seen. Marcus picked up his coffee, then looked toward the wall. The company slogan remained there, exactly where it had always been. Everyone deserves a seat. For years, those words had been decoration. For years, they had been branding. For years, they had been a promise people forgot to keep. Now they meant something again. A young customer entered, rainwater still clinging to his jacket. He looked uncertain, a little nervous, the way people often do when entering a new place. Danielle greeted him immediately, not because of his clothes, not because of his appearance, not because of what she thought he might spend, Because he was a person. Nothing more. Nothing less. Marcus smiled. His mother would have loved that. Arthur followed his gaze, then quietly asked, "What are you thinking about?" Marcus looked around the cafe. The people, the laughter, the conversations, the kindness, the life. Then he thought about a rainy day long ago, a bus stop, a cup of hot chocolate, a promise, and a little boy who refused to forget. Finally, he answered, "I'm thinking my mother was right." Arthur smiled. About what? Marcus looked once more at the sign. Everyone deserves a seat. Then toward Danielle. Then toward Arthur. Then toward the customers filling the room. About everything. Outside, Seattle continued moving beneath gray skies and distant rain. Inside, warmth remained. Not because of the coffee, not because of the pastries, because people finally remembered something simple, something easy to forget, something worth building a company around. You never know who is sitting across from you. You never know what they've survived. You never know what they're carrying. But kindness costs nothing, and sometimes it changes everything. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment and share a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, because everyone deserves a seat, and nobody should ever have to earn the right to belong. When Marcus looked across that cafe and saw Arthur smiling at the window table, while Danielle finally received credit for the dreams she had carried in that little notebook for years, the promise he made as a boy was no longer just words on a wall. It had become something real.
This story isn't really about money, titles, or who owns the cafe. It's about the people who keep doing the right thing. Long after the world stopped noticing, Danielle keeps showing up, keep creating, and keep caring, even when nobody was giving her credit. Today, think about one person around you who is forced, quietly goes unnoticed. Send a message, say thank you, or simply tell them, you see what they've been doing. Marcus changed life because he paid attention, and sometimes that's where real change begins. If this story touched your heart, comment one below. And tell me this, have you ever known someone like Daniel? Someone who keeps giving their best, even when nobody seems to notice? I love to read your story, and stay with me, because the next story begins with a stranger everyone ignored until one moment revealed who he really was.